Sometimes, the most valuable things we inherit aren't made of gold or paper, they're made of secrets. When Chelsea's father passed away, her sister Portia inherited a fortune, and Chelsea received nothing but an old, crumbling shed. But what waited inside that shed wasn't junk, it was a truth powerful enough to destroy everything she thought she knew about her family, and the man she married. As buried debts, hidden letters, and unspoken sins rise to the surface, Chelsea discovers that time, her father's greatest gift, can heal or haunt, depending on how you keep it. In this gripping emotional thriller of love, betrayal, and redemption, one woman must decide what to protect, her family's legacy, or herself. The storm started an hour before the funeral. Rain slashed across the car windows, blurring the world into streaks of gray as Chelsea sat in the passenger seat, clutching the same white envelope her father had given her 2 years ago. Inside was a letter she had never opened, his handwriting sharp and elegant, sealed in wax that had cracked along one edge. The hum of the wipers filled the silence between her and her husband. "Do you want to read it?" he asked gently. Chelsea shook her head. "Not yet." Outside, mourners in black hurried through the cemetery gates, umbrellas bending against the wind. Somewhere beyond the trees was the open grave, a rectangle of earth that now defined the distance between her and the man who had once been the center of her world. It wasn't the rain that made her eyes sting. It was the memory of her father's last night, the quiet, labored breathing, the words he had tried to speak but couldn't, and her own promise left unfulfilled, "I'll tell you first, Dad, when it happens." She'd meant it when she said it. But life, messy, fast, and cruelly ordinary, had other plans. She pressed her palm over her stomach, the smallest, newest secret in her life, and whispered beneath her breath, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." By the time they reached the family house, the storm had eased into drizzle. The smell of wet soil rose through the air like something sacred. The house stood exactly as she remembered, the porch light flickering, the garden wild from neglect, and the wind chime her father had hung last spring still whispering in broken rhythm. Her mother stood at the door. Grief had aged her in weeks. Her movements were gentle but deliberate, as though every gesture had to pass through the filter of loss. "Come inside, dear," her mother murmured. "Your sister's already here." That last sentence made Chelsea pause. Portia. The name alone brought the old tension bubbling back, years of polite rivalry turned sour. The last time they'd spoken, it had ended with slammed doors and words neither could take back. Chelsea stepped inside. Portia was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the couch, tapping her phone with nails painted the color of crushed rubies. She looked up briefly. "You're late." Chelsea exhaled slowly. There was traffic. And rain. Portia's voice was smooth, sharp-edged. "Of course." Their mother hovered between them, as mothers do, referee, caretaker, and bridge, then nodded toward the man seated near the window. "The lawyer is here. He's been waiting." Samuel Wright, their father's attorney, rose politely. Mid-40s, precise in his gray suit, his face carried the careful neutrality of a man accustomed to family storms. "Mrs. Grant," he said, offering a small nod, "Chelsea, Portia, thank you for coming. I'm truly sorry for your loss." He placed a leather folder on the coffee table. Its weight drew every eye. "The will was written 6 months ago," he continued. "Your father was clear about his intentions." Chelsea's pulse quickened. Portia leaned forward like someone waiting for applause. Their mother sat quietly, twisting her wedding ring. Samuel opened the folder. "The family home and surrounding property are to be retained by Mrs. Grant. The remaining assets include monetary savings of approximately $100,000 and a small storage building located on the eastern edge of the property." Portia blinked. "A shed?" "Yes," Samuel said, matter of fact. "A small structure near the old vegetable field." Portia laughed, short, disbelieving. "That thing? It's practically collapsing." He ignored the comment and continued reading. "Your father specified that the savings in the shed should be divided between you two, to settle as you mutually agree." Silence stretched like wire. "I'll take the savings," Portia said, breaking it. "It's fair. Chelsea's already got her husband's job and her city life." Chelsea's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Portia smiled, a flash of white teeth. Oh, come on. You don't even need it. What are you going to do with $100,000? Decorate your apartment with guilt? The lawyer cleared his throat. Ladies, no, Chelsea interrupted softly. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried an edge that silenced the room. This isn't a marketplace, Portia. Then what do you want? Chelsea hesitated. Part of her wanted to argue, to fight for fairness, but she saw her mother's weary eyes, the eyes of a woman who had already buried one piece of her heart today. Chelsea sighed. Fine. Take it. I'll take the shed. You're serious? I'm tired, Portia. Just take what you want. Her sister smirked triumphantly, as though she'd just won an argument she'd been preparing for years. Samuel nodded and began preparing documents. The formalities blurred into the soft tick of the grandfather clock and the faint smell of roses from the funeral bouquets. By the time Chelsea signed her name, the storm had stopped completely. When the lawyer stood to leave, he handed Chelsea a small brass key on a string. For the shed, he said quietly. He mentioned you'd understand. She frowned. Understand what? But the man only smiled faintly. Your father had a habit of hiding meaning in simple things. Perhaps you'll find it. That night, Chelsea couldn't sleep. The house creaked with the rhythm of old wood and older memories. From her childhood room, she could see the silhouette of the shed through the curtain, a small shadow at the edge of the moonlit field. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt drawn to it, the way people are drawn to stories that promise closure. She slipped on a coat and stepped outside. The grass was cold beneath her bare feet. The shed loomed ahead, weathered and silent. As she approached, a low groan escaped its hinges, as if it were waking from a long sleep. She inserted the key. It turned easily, too easily, as if the lock had been waiting. Inside, the air smelled of dust and iron. Moonlight spilled through the gaps in the wood, revealing the scattered remnants of her father's quiet life, tools arranged neatly on hooks, a wooden chair worn smooth by use, a stack of notebooks bound with string. She ran her hand over the surface of the old workbench. Her fingertips found grooves, initials carved into the wood, C+P, 1999. She smiled despite herself. We used to play here, she whispered. For a long moment, she simply stood there, listening to the wind and the distant murmur of the house. She should have felt closure. Instead, she felt a strange anticipation, like the story wasn't over, only paused. Her eyes drifted toward the far wall, where the wood looked newer than the rest. A section of paneling slightly brighter, as though recently replaced. She touched it, solid, but hollow underneath. Strange. She made a mental note to check again in the morning, when light returned. By sunrise, the world outside had turned gold and soft. Her mother was making tea in the kitchen when Chelsea walked in, her hair damp from dew. You went out, her mother said, noticing the mud on her slippers. I couldn't sleep, Chelsea admitted. I was thinking about the shed. Her mother smiled faintly, almost wistfully. He loved that place. Said it was his sanctuary. Did he ever mention anything unusual about it? Her mother stirred her tea. Only that it kept what mattered most to him. But he never said what that was. Chelsea felt her chest tighten. He told the lawyer I'd understand. Her mother looked at her then, eyes soft, voice low. Maybe he didn't mean understand right away. Later that day, Chelsea walked to the field again. The sky was clear now, birds dipping low across the tall grass. The shed waited, quiet and unassuming, as though guarding something it didn't yet want to share. She stepped inside, the wood creaking underfoot. She ran her hand along the wall she had noticed the night before. The boards were uneven, one nailed at a slightly different angle. A loose nail caught her sleeve. And when she tugged it free, something shifted behind the wall, a faint, hollow click. The sound was so small it might have been her imagination. But Chelsea's pulse quickened. There was something here. Something her father had left behind, not for the lawyer, not for Portia, but for her. As the wind outside whispered through the trees, Chelsea stood in that quiet, dusty shed and felt, for the first time since the funeral, a fragile spark of something she hadn't felt in months. Not grief. Not anger. But curiosity, the first step toward a secret her father had hidden in plain sight. And somewhere in that curiosity, between the echo of her father's voice and the weight of the brass key in her palm, a story began to move. Slowly, quietly, the past started to turn its lock. The next morning came with sunlight that looked too gentle for grief. Birdsong drifted through the open window as Chelsea sat at the kitchen table, notebook open, pen unmoving. She'd been staring at the same blank page for an hour, trying to write a letter she knew she'd never send, one addressed simply to Dad. Her mother moved quietly around the kitchen, humming the tune her father used to whistle when he worked in the garden. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. "Did you sleep?" her mother asked, without looking up from the kettle. Chelsea nodded. "Eventually." "Did you dream?" "Maybe." She hesitated, then added, "I think about him a lot." Her mother poured tea into 2 cups and slid one toward her. "You're not the only one." They drank in silence for a while, the kind of silence that holds entire conversations. Finally, her mother spoke again, eyes fixed on the window. "Your sister called." Chelsea stiffened. "Oh." "She said she might come by later." "Why?" Her mother sighed. "I didn't ask. Maybe she just wants to talk." Chelsea's laugh was soft and bitter. "Portia doesn't just want to talk. She wants something." "Be kind," her mother said gently. "She's your sister." "Sometimes I forget that." Her mother didn't answer. She didn't need to. The distance between the 2 sisters had become a presence of its own, thick, invisible, and exhausting. When Chelsea reached the shed again later that morning, the air inside was warmer, less hostile. She stood in the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the dimness. The same hollow panel on the back wall caught her attention. The loose nail she'd tugged at last night was now half bent, pointing down like an arrow. Chelsea picked up a small hammer from the workbench and pried it open carefully. A section of the wooden panel shifted, revealing a narrow gap, just enough space to slide her fingers through. Her pulse quickened. Behind the first layer of wood was another wall, thinner, patched crudely. When she pressed on it, the entire section gave a soft creak, not quite a door, but close. "Dad," she whispered, the word a mixture of wonder and disbelief. "What did you hide here?" She ran her hands along the edges until her fingertips brushed something metallic, cold and smooth. A latch. It moved with a reluctant click. And then, a small portion of the wall swung inward. Dust spilled into the air like breath after a long silence. Inside was a narrow alcove barely wide enough to step into. The floorboards were uneven, the ceiling low. At the back stood a steel safe, dull and heavy, its paint chipped at the corners. Chelsea's heart stuttered. It was real. Her father's secret wasn't just an idea, it had weight, shape, and a story that had been waiting for her to listen. She knelt beside the safe and ran her hand over the metal. A familiar sense of déjà vu rippled through her, the faint memory of being a little girl, sitting in her father's office, watching him lock away grown-up things with a smile that said, "One day, you'll understand." The safe was old, its dial stiff with age. Next to it, tucked behind a box of rusted nails, she noticed a folded handkerchief. Inside were 2 keys tied together with string. Her breath caught. She slipped one into the safe's keyhole. It fit perfectly, turning with a metallic sigh. The door cracked open an inch, enough to release a smell of oil and old paper. Inside lay a leather-bound notebook, a velvet pouch, and a wooden box small enough to fit in her palm. She opened the notebook first. Most of it was numbers, dates, purchase lists, serial codes. But on the last page, in her father's steady handwriting, a line stood alone: "For the one who remembers patience, not everything valuable can be sold." She traced the ink with her finger. The handwriting was uneven, perhaps written when his hands were shaking. Chelsea opened the velvet pouch next. Inside were watches, 6 of them, each unique. Gold, silver, and leather-banded pieces that glimmered faintly in the filtered light. Their faces caught the sun like tiny mirrors. One of them she recognized immediately, her father's old pocket watch. The one he wore every Sunday when they visited the lake. She pressed the button and listened. It still ticked. Tears stung her eyes. He had kept them all. All those years, her father had told everyone the watches were just old collectibles. But he had protected them like living things. Chelsea sat on the floor of the shed, cradling them in her hands, and for the first time since his death, she smiled. By afternoon, the secret began to weigh differently. She couldn't ignore the practical questions: value, legality, inheritance. Her father had left the shed to her, but the contents? That was murkier territory. Chelsea called the lawyer. "Mr. Wright, it's me, Chelsea Grant." "Of course," he said. "How can I help?" "I found something. In the shed." There was a pause on the other end, the kind that meant he'd been expecting that call all along. "What did you find?" "A safe," she said slowly. "And things inside. Watches. Notes. Your father mentioned he stored personal items there. Do you know if they're valuable?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "They look expensive." The lawyer's tone softened. "Then I'd advise documentation first. Photograph everything. Don't sell anything yet." "And Chelsea, yes? There's a reason your father left that to you. Don't let anyone pressure you about it." But pressure, as it turned out, didn't need an invitation. That evening, Portia arrived. She didn't knock, she never did. The door opened, perfume entering before her. "Nice to see you too," Chelsea muttered. Portia dropped her designer bag onto the table and scanned the room. "So," she said, "how's life as a property owner? Still enjoying your shed?" Chelsea ignored the barb. "What do you want, Portia?" Her sister smiled, too sweet to be genuine. "Just catching up. You disappeared after the funeral. I needed time." "Time," Portia echoed. "Right. Must be nice to have time and no bills." Chelsea frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, please." Portia's tone hardened. "Mom said you've been spending a lot of time out there, the shed, the field. Found anything interesting?" The words dropped like stones. Chelsea froze. "Why are you asking that?" Portia leaned closer. "Because I heard from someone, Aunt Carol, I think, that you sent her a gift card. A thank you gift. $200, wasn't it? Generous, considering you only inherited a shack." Chelsea's pulse quickened. "So what?" "So where'd the money come from, Chels?" The way she said it, Chels, that old nickname twisted into mockery, made Chelsea's chest tighten. "It's none of your business." "Oh, I think it is." Portia's voice sharpened. "I took the money fair and square. You got the leftovers. Don't act like you're suddenly the golden child." "I don't care about being the golden child," Chelsea snapped. "I cared about Dad." For a heartbeat, something flickered behind Portia's expression, guilt, or maybe fear, before she masked it with a smirk. "Care doesn't pay rent," she said, grabbing her purse. "But who knows, maybe the shed does." And just like that, she was gone. That night, Chelsea sat by the window, heart pounding, replaying the conversation. Had she been careless? The watches were still in the shed, locked away, but Portia's instincts were sharp. If she suspected anything, no, Chelsea thought, shaking her head. She wouldn't risk it. Still, she couldn't ignore the feeling that the walls around her were closing in, inch by inch. She glanced at the pocket watch lying on her nightstand. The steady tick echoed through the quiet room, each beat a reminder that secrets, like time, never stay buried forever. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at her doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, in neat handwriting, were 3 words, "You're not alone." Chelsea stared at it for a long time, her skin prickling. It wasn't her father's handwriting. And it definitely wasn't kind. That night, when she went to check the shed, she found the door slightly ajar. The padlock she'd used that morning hung twisted, broken clean through. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed, but the dust near the safe had been smudged by footprints. Someone had been there. And whoever it was, they knew about her father's secret. The next 48 hours moved like a fever dream. Chelsea barely slept. She double-locked every door, checked the shed at sunrise, and stared at the anonymous note until the ink began to blur. "You're not alone." 3 words, simple but corrosive. She kept telling herself it was nothing, some prank, maybe a misunderstanding. But the broken lock said otherwise. Someone had been inside that shed. Someone who knew where to look. And the only person who could possibly know was Portia. Chelsea drove to town that afternoon under a sky thick with gathering rain. Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The rhythmic thud of the wipers kept time with her heartbeat. When she pulled into her sister's driveway, the city felt like another planet. Portia's home was sleek and glassy, the kind of place designed to make you feel slightly unworthy when you entered. She rang the bell twice before Portia opened the door. "Oh," Portia said flatly. "The country girl visits the queen." Chelsea didn't bother with pleasantries. "Why were you at Mom's house?" Portia blinked. "Excuse me?" "Don't act surprised." "Someone broke into the shed." "The one Dad left me." Her sister's expression flickered, just for a second, before turning cold. "Are you seriously accusing me of breaking into a pile of rotten wood?" "I'm accusing you of being desperate." That word landed. Desperate. Portia crossed her arms, chin high. "You've lost your mind." "I have no reason to stop lying." Chelsea snapped. The emotion cracked through her voice before she could stop it. "I know you've been talking to people, asking questions. Aunt Carol told me you've been prying." Portia's jaw clenched. "So what if I have?" "You've been hiding something." "Don't act innocent, Chelsea. I can smell money from a mile away." Chelsea stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Dad didn't leave you what you think he did. You spent the inheritance, didn't you?" "All of it." For a moment, silence. And then, a flash of vulnerability. Portia's eyes flickered downward. "I needed to," she whispered. "Needed to?" "I was in debt, okay? Credit cards, loans. I thought I could fix it before Mark found out. But he did." And now, she broke off, exhaling through gritted teeth. "Now everything's falling apart." Chelsea's anger faltered, replaced by something colder, pity. "You should have said something." "Oh, please," Portia sneered, regaining her composure. "You'd love that, to see me crawl to you." Chelsea stepped back. "You think everything's about pride. But Dad left you enough to start over. Instead, you buried yourself in more lies." "And what about you?" Portia shot back. "Miss Perfect Daughter. Always doing the right thing, always the martyr. You think you're so pure, but you're not fooling anyone. You got something out of that shed, didn't you? Tell me, Chelsea. What was it?" Chelsea hesitated. That pause, that tiny beat of uncertainty, was all Portia needed. She smiled, slow and poisonous. "You just told me everything." By the time Chelsea left the house, the rain had returned, hard and heavy. It blurred the streetlights and soaked her clothes as she walked to the car. She climbed in, slammed the door, and pressed her forehead to the steering wheel. She wanted to scream. But instead, she whispered to herself, "He left it for me. Not her. Me." Still, guilt clawed at her. The watches, the money, the secrecy, none of it felt like a blessing anymore. It was a curse stitched to her father's memory. And then, later that night, she received the second note. It was slipped under the door sometime after midnight. This one was shorter. "You should have told me sooner." Chelsea's stomach dropped. Whoever was writing these knew too much, not just about the shed, but about her father's words, the things he'd said only to her. She checked the locks again, grabbed her phone, and called her husband. "Eli, I think someone's watching the house." "What?" "Chelsea, slow down, I found another note." "And I think Portia," the sound outside cut her off. A car engine. "Close." She peeked through the curtain. Headlights washed across the field, stopping near the edge of the shed. The driver's door opened. Someone stepped out. The night was a blur of motion, flashlight beams slicing through the dark, rain whispering across the field, Chelsea's breath coming fast and shallow. She moved barefoot through the wet grass, her heart thudding so loudly she was certain the intruder could hear it. From behind the oak tree, she saw the figure, slender, soaped, wearing a dark coat that glistened in the rain. The beam of the flashlight trembled slightly, scanning the shed door. Then the voice. Familiar. Portia. Chelsea froze, disbelief turning to anger. Her sister bent over the padlock, fumbling with something, a spare key, or maybe a tool. What are you doing? Chelsea's voice rang out, sharp and cutting through the storm. Portia gasped, spinning around, light flashing across her pale face. Chelsea. You scared me half to death. You shouldn't be here. I just wanted to look, you broke in. I didn't. You left me a note? Portia's eyes widened. What note? Don't lie to me. I swear, I don't know what you're talking about. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches, making the moment feel unanchored, two sisters shouting over ghosts. Chelsea stepped forward. Dad left that shed to me, Portia. You had your chance. You took your share. Portia's face twisted, a mix of shame, rage, and fear. It's not fair, she said through clenched teeth. You get the secret, the mystery, the sympathy, and I get nothing. You got everything. You just threw it away. The flashlight beam jerked violently as Portia gestured. You don't understand what it's like to watch your life fall apart while you pretend to be perfect. Then, in the chaos, a loud crack of thunder. And beneath it, another sound. Wood splitting. The shed door, swollen from the rain, gave way under the tension. It swung inward and hit the side wall. Something shifted inside, a low groan of metal against wood. Both women turned. The safe. It wobbled, tilted forward. Move. Chelsea shouted. But the warning came too late. The heavy steel box crashed forward with a deafening thud, hitting Portia's leg and pinning her against the muddy floor. She screamed, sharp, animal, pure. Chelsea rushed forward, rain soaking her hair, hands trembling as she tried to lift the corner of the safe. It didn't budge. Don't move, she cried. I'm calling for help. Portia's eyes were wild, full of pain and panic. Don't tell anyone, she gasped. Are you insane? You're hurt. I said, don't. Her words broke into sobs. Chelsea grabbed her phone anyway, fingers slick, dialing emergency services as thunder rolled above them. When the operator answered, Chelsea's voice cracked. Please, my sister's been crushed. She's bleeding, please hurry. The sirens came 20 minutes later, red lights flashing across the rain-soaked field. Paramedics lifted the safe with specialized equipment, freeing Portia's twisted leg. She screamed again as they placed her on a stretcher. Chelsea stood back, numb, mud streaked across her hands and arms. The shed looked smaller now, pathetic under the flashing lights, a monument of greed and grief. An officer asked questions. Chelsea answered automatically. Yes, it was an accident. Yes, they were sisters. No, she hadn't pushed her. When they finally drove Portia away, the field was quiet again. Only the wind remained, cold and indifferent. Chelsea walked back toward the house. Her steps felt heavy, the adrenaline draining from her bones. Inside, she peeled off her soaked clothes and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked unfamiliar, pale, haunted, streaked with mud and rain. She whispered to herself, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Then her gaze drifted to the counter, to something she hadn't noticed before. A small folded note, damp from her wet hands. It wasn't the one from earlier. This one was new. You did what you had to. Chelsea's stomach turned. She looked toward the darkened hallway, then the window overlooking the field. Someone else had been out there tonight. Someone who had seen everything. The ambulance's sirens faded into the night like a wound closing, but the echo stayed. Rain dripped steadily from the roof of the porch as Chelsea sat on the steps, wrapped in a blanket that no longer felt warm. Her hands still shook, phantom tremors that refused to fade. The image kept replaying, the safe tilting, her sister's scream, the flash of red lights, the final note that hadn't come from her father or from Portia. You did what you had to. She kept the note on the table in front of her, its damp paper curling at the edges. Whoever was sending them had been there. Watching. Waiting. A crunch of gravel broke the silence. Headlights cut across the field, and a police cruiser rolled up the driveway. Officer Reed, the same man who'd questioned her earlier, stepped out, his raincoat gleaming under the porch light. "Miss Grant," he said softly, climbing the steps. "Mind if I come in for a moment?" Chelsea nodded, wordless. Inside, Reed removed his hat, shaking off the rain. "We've confirmed your sister's stable. Broken leg, some bruising. No internal bleeding." Chelsea exhaled shakily. "Thank God." He paused. "She mentioned an argument." Chelsea looked down at her hands. "We argued, yes. But I didn't," he raised a hand. "No one's accusing you of anything. Accidents like this happen all the time." Still, his tone carried something else, of curiosity, perhaps suspicion, or just the weight of a story that didn't fully add up. Chelsea managed a faint smile. "I suppose the town will love this one. Two sisters fighting over their dead father's legacy, classic." Reed gave a non-committal nod, glancing around the room. His gaze lingered on the table. "What's that?" Chelsea followed his eyes. "The note. Just something I found. Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated but handed it over. Reed studied it under the light. No signature. Typed. The papers slightly waxed, printer grade. He looked up. "You said there were others?" "Yes. 3. Do you still have them?" Chelsea's lips pressed together. 2 were ruined by rain. This one's new. He folded it carefully. "We'll have it analyzed, just in case." "Officer," Chelsea said, her voice low, "do you think someone's watching me?" Reed didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "I think someone's interested in you. The question is why." When he left, the house felt impossibly empty. Chelsea paced the hallway, every sound amplified, the old clock ticking, the pipes groaning, the wind brushing against the shutters. She went to her bedroom window and looked out toward the field. The shed stood in moonlight, battered and silent, a shadow with secrets. Something deep in her chest whispered that it wasn't over. She picked up her phone and dialed Eli. He answered on the second ring, voice heavy with concern. "Chels? I just saw the news." "They said she's okay," Chelsea interrupted. "Broken leg, but she'll live. Thank God. And you? Are you safe?" "I don't know." She hesitated, then told him about the notes. About the break-ins. About the feeling of being watched. There was silence on the line, then his voice hardened. "I'm driving there tonight." "No, Eli, it's late." "The roads, I don't care." Chelsea smiled weakly despite herself. "You always say that when you're scared." "I'm not scared. He paused, voice softening. "I'm worried about you." "I'll be fine. The police are watching." "That doesn't sound convincing." She looked again toward the shed. The lock gleamed faintly under the moon. "Maybe I'm just being paranoid." "Maybe," he said gently. "But promise me you'll lock every door." "I will." When the call ended, she sat in silence, the phone still warm against her ear. Morning came gray and brittle. Chelsea woke to the sound of her mother's voice downstairs, talking to someone. She slipped on a robe and padded down the hallway. Her mother stood in the living room, pale and weary. "It's the lawyer," she said. Mr. Samuel Wright turned from the window. He looked uneasy, his usual composure fraying at the edges. "Chelsea," he began, "I came as soon as I heard about the accident." She forced a polite smile. "I didn't expect you. I had some unfinished business with your father's estate. Something we need to discuss." Her stomach tightened. "Now?" "Yes. It's important." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single envelope, cream-colored, with her name handwritten on the front. The handwriting stopped her heart. It was her father's. "I found this in our archives," the lawyer said quietly. He asked that it be delivered only if something happened involving the shed. Chelsea stared at him. he knew this would happen? Not exactly. But he was cautious. He believed the shed might cause tension. He told me it contained something meaningful, not material. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a short letter. Chelsea, if you're reading this, it means the past has found its way forward. The shed was never about inheritance, it was about trust. There are things in this world more fragile than money. Guard them. And if your sister ever comes to you in need, remember, mercy is the truest form of strength. Dad tears blurred the ink. Her father had known. Known about the cracks between them, known about the greed that might rise from grief. And still, he believed she could be the one to mend it. That evening, Chelsea visited the hospital. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. Portia lay in bed, leg elevated, skin pale. The television murmured quietly in the corner. When Chelsea entered, her sister turned her face away. If you came to gloat, save it. I didn't, Chelsea said softly, setting down a bouquet of lilies. You're lucky to be alive. Lucky, Portia scoffed. That's one word for it. They sat in silence, the hum of machines filling the space between them. Finally, Chelsea spoke. Dad left me a letter. Portia's eyes flicked toward her, wary. What kind of letter? About the shed. About us. She swallowed. He wanted me to forgive you. Portia's lips parted, but no sound came out. He said mercy is strength, Chelsea continued. I think he knew we'd end up here, both of us broken in different ways. Don't make this sound poetic, Portia whispered. You don't know what it's like, then tell me. Portia hesitated. Her eyes filled slowly, against her will. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. Mark left me. The bills kept coming. I thought if I could just find something valuable, I could fix it. Chelsea listened. The words were jagged but honest. I saw you sending gifts to relatives, Portia continued, voice trembling. I thought, she must have found something. Something Dad left. It wasn't about greed. It was fear. I just didn't want to feel like a failure. Chelsea's anger melted into something quieter. You should have told me. Portia laughed bitterly. What would you have done? Handed me a watch? Or pity? Maybe both. The silence that followed was heavy but softer than before. When Chelsea stood to leave, Portia's voice stopped her. Chels? Chelsea turned. I'm sorry. Chelsea nodded. So am I. Back at the house, dusk had settled like smoke. The field shimmered with moisture, and the shed stood dark against the horizon. Chelsea's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Meet me at the shed. Midnight. Her blood ran cold. She tried calling back, no response. She called Officer Reed, but the call dropped mid-ring. The service bars vanished. Outside, the wind picked up again, pushing the trees into restless motion. The air smelled of ozone and rain. She should have stayed inside. She knew that. But curiosity, that old, dangerous thread, pulled her forward. By the time the clock struck 12, she was walking across the field, flashlight trembling in her hand. Each step felt heavier than the last. The shed loomed ahead, familiar, silent, waiting. She reached the door. It was already unlocked. Inside, the air was cold, still damp from the storm. The safe stood upright again, its heavy bulk restored by the police. Chelsea stepped closer. Something glittered on the floor, a silver chain. One of the watches. Then she heard it. A faint sound. Behind her. Footsteps. She turned sharply, flashlight slicing through the dark. A figure stood in the doorway, half in shadow, half in moonlight. And it wasn't Portia. Who's there? Chelsea demanded. The figure didn't answer. Then, slowly, they stepped forward, and the light revealed a face she hadn't seen in months. Her husband. Eli. But something in his eyes was wrong, sharp, restless, unfamiliar. What are you doing here? She whispered. He smiled, small and cold. Finishing what your father started. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm that had gathered all evening finally broke open, wind howling through the open shed door, scattering dust across the floor. Chelsea stood frozen, the flashlight trembling in her grip, the beam flickering over her husband's face, a face both familiar and suddenly foreign. "Eli," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the warped floorboards. "I could ask you the same thing," he said, voice low and eerily calm. "Out here alone, in the middle of the night, what are you still protecting?" "The truth," she said. "And my father's memory." His eyes softened for a second, then hardened. "Your father's memory?" He laughed, dry and humorless. "That man left behind more than memories, Chelsea. He left debts. Bad ones." Her stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" Eli moved toward the safe, running his hand along the cold steel. "He didn't tell you, did he? He wasn't the saint you keep painting him as. The farm, the company, he took loans he couldn't pay. Big ones. And guess who signed as guarantor when he was too sick to drive himself to the bank?" Chelsea's pulse quickened. "You're lying." He shook his head. "I wish I were. When he passed, it all transferred to you, to us. I tried to shield you from it, Chels. But they found me." "They?" "People your father borrowed from. The kind of people who don't send polite reminders." Her voice trembled. "You should have told me." "I tried." His tone cracked, anger slipping through. "But every time I did, you looked at me like I was breaking something sacred. Like mentioning his flaws was blasphemy." Chelsea lowered the flashlight, its glow dimming. "So what now? You came here to what, steal what's left?" He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw the exhaustion behind the fury. "Not steal," he said softly. "Retrieve. That safe, the watches, the records, they're collateral. The only thing that can save us." She stepped between him and the safe. "No move, Chelsea." "You don't understand," she said. "They're not his debt, they're his redemption. Everything in there was meant to rebuild what he lost, not feed someone else's greed." "Greed," he snapped. "Do you know what happens when you owe the wrong people? They don't wait for redemption, they collect." She shook her head. "You sound just like them." "Because I've been living in their shadow for months," he shot back. "You think I wanted this? You think I want to scare you? I'm trying to fix what your father broke." Lightning tore the sky open, illuminating both of them in sharp, ghostly flashes. Chelsea's tears came hot and silent. "You lied to me. I protected you. You watched me grieve him, and you lied. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone says that before they betray you," she whispered. For a second, silence, just the storm and the faint tick of the pocket watch in her palm. Then Eli's voice softened. "Please, Chels. Give me the key. Let's just end this." She stared at him, rainwater dripping from her hair. The key hung from a string around her neck, the same one her father had given her. She gripped it tightly. "You can't take what isn't yours." His eyes darkened. "You think this is about ownership?" He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing her wrist. The flashlight hit the floor and rolled away, its beam spinning wildly. The shed exploded into chaos, rain slashing through the open door, shadows jumping like living things. "Eli, stop," she cried, struggling against him. "This isn't you." "It's exactly me," he shouted, voice breaking. "The man trying to keep our lives from collapsing." He wrestled for the key. The chain snapped, clattering onto the floor. Chelsea stumbled back, catching her breath, staring at him in disbelief. Eli froze, the key in his hand. His chest heaved. The moment stretched, then broke when thunder rolled overhead. He turned toward the safe. "Don't," she whispered. He didn't listen. The lock clicked. The safe door groaned open, the metal shrieking like an old wound. Inside, the watches glimmered under the spinning flashlight beam, time itself turned into temptation. Eli reached in, and stopped. There was something else inside now. A folded envelope. New. its edges crisp, paper unstained by age. He frowned, pulling it free. Chelsea stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. The handwriting wasn't her father's. It was blocky, unfamiliar. Eli opened it. Inside was a single sentence, debt paid. Time kept. He looked at her, confusion etched across his face. What the hell does that mean? Before Chelsea could answer, the sound of a car engine roared outside. Headlights flared through the rain, slicing across the open doorway. Eli's face drained of color. "They're here," he whispered. "Who?" But he was already moving, shoving the envelope into his pocket, slamming the safe shut, reaching for her hand. "Come on." "Eli, what's happening?" "They followed me." They sprinted into the field, rain hitting their faces like needles. The headlights grew brighter, closer. A black sedan skidded to a stop on the gravel road. Two men stepped out. Suits, umbrellas, faces blank as marble. One of them called out over the rain. "Mr. Allen. You know how this works. No running." Chelsea turned to Eli, horrified. "You brought them here?" "I thought I could fix it before they found out you led them to me." "Chels, I didn't mean to. Enough," she shouted. The men approached, slow and deliberate. "You have something that belongs to our client," one said. "The old man's collection. It's time to settle his account." Eli stepped in front of her. "It's gone. I burned it." "Wrong answer," the man said, pulling a gun. Chelsea's breath caught. "No, please," the other man gestured calmly. "We don't want trouble. Just the watches." Lightning flashed again, revealing the faint shape of Officer Reed's cruiser cresting the far road. Siren off, lights low. Eli saw it too. "You called the police?" "I didn't," she whispered. "They came on their own." The moment teetered, every breath a fuse. Then the armed man turned toward her, impatient. "Last chance, Mrs. Allen." Chelsea looked past him, at the shed, the open door, the faint gleam of the safe inside. Something shifted in her, the weight of her father's final letter, the memory of his words, "Mercy is the truest form of strength." "Take it," she said. Everyone froze. "What?" Eli hissed. She stepped forward, rain running down her face. "You want the watches? Take them. But you leave us, and my father's name, alone." The man studied her. "Smart woman." He nodded to his partner. The second man disappeared into the shed, returning moments later with a heavy duffel, the watches inside. When he passed her, Chelsea said quietly, "They won't bring you peace." He smirked. "Neither did your father." Then they were gone, tail lights fading into the storm. Eli sank to his knees in the mud, head in his hands. "What have I done?" Chelsea stood still, shaking. The rain felt colder now. "You destroyed everything he built," she said. "I thought I was saving us." "You were saving yourself." He looked up at her, eyes red. "You'll never forgive me, will you?" "I'll try," she said softly. "Because he asked me to." But her voice broke on the word try. When the police arrived minutes later, Eli surrendered quietly. Officer Reed took his statement, expression unreadable. The men in the sedan were gone, leaving only tire tracks and a hollowed-out silence. Chelsea gave her own account, every word feeling like it belonged to someone else. By dawn, the shed stood empty, a shell stripped of its mystery, its weight, its heart. But when Reed returned from inspecting the safe, he held something small in his gloved hand. "Found this wedged behind the frame," he said. A single watch, her father's pocket watch. It was still ticking. Chelsea took it gently, clutching it against her chest. For the first time in months, she cried, not from fear, but from the strange relief of survival. Time, her father had said, wasn't something you owned. It was something you kept. And she finally understood. Later that morning, when they drove Eli away, he turned once, eyes full of regret. She didn't wave. The sun broke through the clouds, weak but insistent. Chelsea walked back to the shed one last time. She placed the pocket watch on the workbench, where the sunlight caught it just right, gold, warm, alive. Debt paid, she whispered. Time kept. And then she closed the door. The world was quieter after the storm. The fields outside Chelsea's home were still slick with rain, dew clinging to the tall grass like fragile glass beads. The shed, once the center of her father's mystery, stood silent beneath the pale wash of morning light, not a tomb now, but a monument. A reminder that secrets, no matter how heavy, eventually turn into lessons. She watched from the porch, coffee cooling in her hands, the steam rising like faint ghosts. Everything that had happened, the accident, the notes, the betrayal, had condensed into a strange stillness inside her, like a wound closing without quite healing. The pocket watch lay open on the table beside her, ticking softly. Each beat was a reminder, time hadn't stopped. It never had. She thought of Eli, the way his voice had cracked in the rain, the desperation in his eyes when he realized what he'd become. He wasn't evil, not really. Just broken in a way she hadn't seen. Broken like the rest of them, by debt, by silence, by love that came with too many conditions. Officer Reed had come by earlier that morning, his report finished, his tone gentle. Your husband will be charged, he'd said. But given the circumstances, the threats, the pressure, it may not be a long sentence. Chelsea had only nodded. She didn't wish prison on Eli. She wished him peace, the kind that comes after you stop running. Now, as she sat alone, she realized peace wasn't a thing you found. It was something you made, piece by piece, after everything else fell apart. Around noon, her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Portia was asking to see her. Chelsea hesitated for a long time before replying. She'd spent her whole life protecting her sister, resenting her, then pitying her, three emotions that looked different but always came from the same place, love. She texted back, I'll be there in an hour. The hospital was quieter than before, sterile and slow, the kind of silence that hums. When Chelsea entered the room, Portia was propped up against the pillows, leg in a cast, a faint bruise along her cheek. For the first time in years, she looked small. I wasn't sure you'd come, Portia said, her voice soft. I wasn't sure either, Chelsea admitted. They both laughed, a weak, uncertain sound, but real. Mom told me about Eli, Portia said after a while. Is he? He's safe, Chelsea said. For now. Portia nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Chels. For all of it. For what I said, what I did. I never wanted to hurt you. Chelsea sat down beside her. I know. I was angry because you were brave enough to stay. I kept running from everything that scared me. You stayed and faced it. Chelsea smiled faintly. You call that bravery? It felt more like drowning. Maybe that's what bravery is, Portia said quietly. Drowning, but deciding not to die. The line lingered between them, a simple, profound, and heartbreakingly true. Before leaving, Chelsea reached into her coat pocket and placed something on the bedside table. Portia frowned. What's this? Chelsea opened her palm, the pocket watch gleamed faintly in the soft light. It's Dad's, she said. He wanted us both to have it. Time's the only thing he ever meant to give. Portia hesitated, eyes filling. I can't take that. Yes, you can. We shared the same time, even if we wasted most of it. Her sister covered her hand gently, their fingers intertwining over the watch. For the first time since the funeral, the distance between them began to fade, not erased, but softened by the quiet understanding that grief had made them both human again. That evening, Chelsea walked the long dirt road behind the house. The storm had left the air smelling of wet soil and cedar. The horizon was bruised gold and gray, the kind of light her father used to call forgiving light. She stopped when she reached the lake, the same one they used to visit on Sundays, when he'd tell her stories about patience and time, about how some things you keep not to own, but to remember. She pulled the last note from her jacket pocket, the one she hadn't shown Reed or Eli. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't from her husband or the men who'd come that night. It was typed, like the others, but the message was different. You understand now. She had found it that morning, slipped under the porch mat. For hours, she'd wondered who had sent it, the lone men? A leftover prank from a stranger? Or maybe, just maybe, her father's quiet way of speaking through the echoes he'd left behind. Now, as she looked at the water, she smiled faintly. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think I do." She folded the note and let it drift into the lake. It floated for a moment before dissolving into the ripples, ink bleeding into blue. Back at the house, she began packing boxes. The lawyer had finalized the paperwork that morning. The property was hers to keep or sell. She decided on neither. She would stay for a while, long enough to make peace with the ghosts that still lingered in the corners. On the workbench inside the shed, she placed a small wooden frame, a photograph of her, Portia, and their father at the lake. Behind it, she taped a folded piece of paper. It read, "To whoever finds this place next, some things you inherit can't be measured in money. Take care of them anyway." She closed the shed door, and this time, she didn't lock it. Weeks passed. The field turned greener, softer. Letters came from Eli, not many, but enough. He apologized, not for the debts or the danger, but for the silence between them. She replied only once. "We were both trying to save something. I just forgot what mattered most." After that, no more letters came. But that was all right. Some stories didn't need more chapters, only the right ending. One late afternoon, Portia arrived unannounced, limping slightly but smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. "I brought something," she said, lifting a small box. Inside were 6 watches, restored, gleaming, ticking in perfect harmony. "I found a repair shop downtown," she explained. "They fixed the ones that weren't broken. Said they were rare. Collector's pieces." Chelsea touched one, her father's pocket watch among them, its face polished and whole again. "They still work?" Portia nodded. "Every single one." The sisters stood in the fading sunlight, listening to the faint ticking filling the shed like a heartbeat. Chelsea smiled. "Then I guess time really was on our side after all." Later, as dusk deepened, Chelsea walked to the porch again. The air was cooler now, the kind of stillness that comes before autumn. She looked up at the sky, streaked with pink and gold, and felt, for the first time in years, completely present. The pain hadn't vanished. The memories hadn't faded. But they'd transformed, from sharp edges into quiet echoes. Her father's words returned, soft and steady in her mind, "Not everything valuable can be sold." She looked down at her wrist. The pocket watch was gone, it belonged to Portia now. But she didn't need it to hear the ticking anymore. It was inside her, steady, patient, alive. When the wind rose again, rustling through the fields, she thought it sounded like him, that familiar low hum he used to make when he worked. And she smiled. Because for the first time, the sound didn't hurt. Final lines: the shed would someday rot and fall away. The watches would stop. The letters would fade. But time, the one thing her father tried to teach them to keep, would go on. And Chelsea, standing in the forgiving light of dusk, finally let it. Greed can make people blind, but forgiveness can make them see again. The story reminds us that true inheritance isn't money or property, it's the values and lessons our loved ones leave behind. Chelsea's journey shows that time is the real treasure, not the watches, not the shed, not the wealth, but the moments we choose to forgive, to heal, and to move forward. Because in the end, what you keep in your heart matters far more than what you keep in your hands. Hourglass Not Done. Red Heart.